Hello, my dear students. Today we are going to talk about the federal setup in India. Now, when we talk about India, we say that it is a quasi-federal setup. What is a quasi-federal setup? That means when we talk about the Indian constitution and the way our country is governed, we need to understand that it has features of a federal state and the features of a unitary state. There are mixed features of both these setups, and that is why it is called a quasi-federal setup. We need to know that why it is called a mixture of both. So for that, we need to understand the features of federalism, and then we need to understand the features of unitary system. In the end, the two will combine, and we will say that it is a quasi-federal state, which means that it bears the features of both federal structure and unitary structure as well. So we will begin with the concept of federalism. What is federalism? So if we go by the definition, it says that federalism means a division of powers between the two or more levels of government. Now here, first try to understand the different levels of government. What do they mean by that? See, in India, we have one government which is called the central government. The second is the state government. And a third form was added to the constitution, which is called the local self-government or the Panchayati Raj system. Now here we are basically concerned about the central government and the state government. Understand this with a very basic example that I'm going to give you. In your schools, you have different classes, and each class is headed by your class teacher. Then what happens? Overall, who looks after the administration of the schools? Who takes the final decision? It's the principal. So, at each level, the class teacher takes hold of the class. Any issues that arise in your class are sorted by the class teacher. But when it comes to the school as a whole, the principal presides over the decisions. Similarly, we have the federal setups in form of states. Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Bihar. What are these? These are federal units, the states as we call them. And each state is headed by the chief minister. So the chief minister takes control of his entire state, whatever issues arise. But when any matter arises where entire nation, entire country is at question, then who takes over? The prime minister. Who heads the center? When we say center, it means the entire nation as a whole. So now if you sync it with the example, your principal is like the prime minister, head of the entire school, and prime minister, head of the entire state. When you talk about the classes, then it is similar to the heads of the state governments, that is the chief minister. So this is what actually meant by the federal system. And when we say the federal units, the term is used. Always remember it is similar. It means that we are talking about the state government. So this is the division of power that federalism talks about. There is a division of power between the central government and the state government. Fine. So therefore, India has union government and state government. Now, where does this division come from? And if there is ever conflict of power between the two, what will happen? So, this division of power actually comes from the Constitution of India. See, if there are no clear-cut divisions, then the state and the union government will fight for the powers. They will fight for the taxes. They will fight for the funds. So that's why the Constitution clearly mentions the division of power between the union and the state government. And how is this division of power were given through the Constitution? In the Constitution, we have three lists: the union list, state list, and the concurrent list. So all the matters that are mentioned in the union list. Who acts upon those subjects? The union government. All the matters that are mentioned in the state list, who acts upon that? The state government. And all the subjects which are neither mentioned in the state list or the union list, they are mentioned in the concurrent list. So the question might ask, the concurrent list is the residuary list. All the residuary subjects, all the subjects that are neither mentioned in the union list or the state list are mentioned in the concurrent list? Yes. Who can act upon the subjects that are mentioned in the state list? Both the union government as well as the state government. Then another question comes. If on a matter listed in the concurrent list, the union government makes law, and the state government also makes laws, then whose law will prevail? The union government. Why? Because the union government is always the senior form of the government. It is taking care of the entire nation. Fine? So this is how, through the constitution, through the three lists, the division of power has been clearly mentioned. Now, look at the features of a federal system. The features of federal system are a written constitution, division of power, supremacy of the constitution, independence of judiciary, and a rigid constitution. So what is a written constitution? But obvious, as the word says, all the policies or the laws are written down. So there is no confusion. Then division of powers, we have just mentioned that how there is a clear-cut division of powers mentioned in the Indian Constitution. Then the supremacy of the Constitution. Since we have a written Constitution, everything is mentioned in the Constitution stands as supreme. That means no law can amend or destroy the basic concepts enshrined in the Constitution. This is known as the basic structure doctrine. I am not going deep down into it right now because it is not feasible for you to understand this at ICSE or at interlevel. So the supremacy of the Constitution means that whenever the country is being governed, we have to keep in mind the principles that have been mentioned in the Constitution. We cannot ignore those principles, whether it's our laws, our policies, all the government policies that are being made, all the laws that the parliament is making, that the judgments are being pronounced on the basis of those laws. Anything, at any cost, we cannot overlook the Constitution. Then, independence of judiciary. See, the independence of judiciary means that we have the legislature, judiciary, and the executive. Legislature makes the laws, executive executes them, and the judiciary interprets them. So the judiciary needs to be independent or free from any influences. So that's why we incorporated the principle of independence of judiciary, so that all the laws that are made, the judiciary can interpret them without any biasness. And this was necessary to preserve the human rights or the fundamental rights of the citizens. When the judiciary gives the right judgments, the people, the citizens, and their rights are protected. Then we come to the last feature, that is a rigid constitution. Now just go back to point number 1, which says written constitution. When a document is written, you cannot change it easily, right? So when our constitution is written, it is an elaborate document, and the changes in it, which we call amendments, cannot be made very easily. Now, I'll give you a brief insight into it. When the constitution was being made, the social structure of the country was different. Now, after so many years, the structure is different. If we talk about the crimes are of different nature. All the scenario, the social legal scenario of the country has changed a lot. So every time a change occurs, we need to adapt ourselves accordingly. That's why there are provision of amendment in the constitution. That means if the need be, if the circumstances so desire, we can bring about the changes in the constitution. But since it is a written document, the changes are not easy to make. Again, why it is not easy to make? Because if any changes or amendments were made easy, then every time the constitution would be distorted. It would be changed. Each government would change the constitution according to itself. And what I just mentioned, the basic structure of the constitution remains the same. So had it not been a rigid constitution, it would have been changed very frequently. And the basic principles enshrined in the constitution would have changed. So that's why we have made a provision of a rigid constitution. Now, again, all this is governed through the division of powers. How it is ensured, what we just discussed through these lists. Each government, the union and the state government, they exercise their powers within their own jurisdiction, which is the respective list. Now we come to the point that why is a federal system important? Federal system is very important for a country like India. And whenever we are talking about these, you have to keep in mind that we are not talking from the current scenario point of view. We need to keep in mind the circumstances when the constitution was actually framed. So we need to understand that as well. Now it accommodates diversity. We all know India is a land of diversity. So each state needs a different set of laws for themselves. The circumstances in one state is different from the other. Rajasthan has a different socio-economic setup than the states in the northeast. Then the states in the south differ from those in the north. So each federal setup governs themselves, they make laws, they take the notice or the details or the laws according to themselves, according to their socio-legal structure, which is very different from each state. So when we have a federal system, we say each unit can govern themselves accordingly. Then it prevents concentration of power. When there is a division of power, it is easy to function. Suppose if all the powers were given to the center, and suppose there is a flood in Punjab. Punjab needs to go to the center again for help. But if Punjab has been made a self-sustaining state, it has a CM, it has its own funds. So at least they can accommodate the recent or the immediate emergency response system. Yeah. So if all the powers were given to the center, then there would be a huge piled up cases, piled up policies and issues to be addressed. Now, at least each has some power, each state has some power to which they can respond. And in case of an emergency or a grave or a serious matter, then they can approach the union. Then, because there is division of powers, there is a different list through which they can govern themselves. It allows the states to govern according to their local needs. The physical features, the geographical features of each state is different. Some have rivers, some do not have rivers. Some needs to work on treaties. Some need to make dams. So this is how they function. Then promotes national unity. So just as you people are in different classes, but outside you are known as a student of a particular school. You are never known by your class, you are known by your school. So ultimately, each state for administrative purposes, they function independently, but ultimately they all come under the umbrella of the nation. Yeah. Now here is a very important case. If you would like, you can cite it. State of West Bengal versus Union of India, which says that India is a union of states. So even if you study Article 1 of the Constitution, it says India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. So the states function on their own, but under the umbrella of the state union government. So this was all about the federal setup. Now we will talk about the unitary features of the Indian Constitution. So let us now understand what is the unitary form of a government. So unitary features. What are unitary features? So unitary features mean that there's a strong hold of the central government. So as I said that each state functions on their own. The CM takes decision on the matters concerning the state. But ultimately the union government heads them all. So just like your principal is at the supreme position, the Prime Minister heads the central government. So what are the features of unitary setup now? Single constitution means that we have a constitution of India. We do not have constitution of Uttar Pradesh, then we have a constitution for Bihar. No. We have just one constitution and everyone comes under that constitution. Single citizenship. You are a citizen of India, whether you're residing in Tamil Nadu, you're residing in Bihar, Odisha, but you are just a citizen of India. There is no citizenship of the state or a federal. You will not say I'm a resident of Uttar Pradesh. You will say I'm a resident of India. I'm a citizen of India. Then a strong center. What we are repeatedly saying, the center holds a supreme position. Flexibility of the constitution. Remember, in federal setup, we were talking about rigid constitution. But when we make certain changes, that is called flexibility. Suppose remember the criminal laws recently, they were amended. Not the new laws that have come. We are talking about the laws that new laws were added in the criminal law amendments were made. So, accordingly, we need to amend the constitution also. So that is the flexibility. But again, it is not very frequent when the constitution is amended. It is only amended to cater to the current scenario or the needs of the citizens. Emergency provisions. See, here I'll talk about only national emergency. We have three kinds of emergencies mentioned in the constitution. That is the state emergency, national emergency, and financial emergency. When there is a national emergency, means when there is a threat to your nation, then the center extracts all the powers, or otherwise we can say all the powers become concentrated in the center. Because remember, the Prime Minister or the center will take decisions when it comes to entire nation is in question. Okay? So that's why in emergency provisions, there are emergency provisions in the unitary system. And unitary system means one center of power. So when in case of a national emergency, the union gets all the powers and makes or takes decisions. Then governor is appointed by the central government or the union government. We all have governors in our state. So who appoints the governor? The president appoints. Now this again is a bit complicated procedure for you to understand right now. When we say the president appoints, it's actually the central government appoints the governors for the state. So this is also one way to keep a control on the federal units. Now we talk about emergency and unitary nature. So I just told you when we have an emergency, right? When India is under an attack, when there are tensions at the international borders and national borders. So center gets power and the federal structure subsides. Right? So center or the unitary setup supersedes federal structure when there is a state of emergency. In this regard, you can cite the case of S.R. Bommai versus Union of India. So now understanding the federal and unitary setup, we can in the end culminate the discussion and say that India is a combination of federal system and unitary system. We have all those features that make a state a federal state, and we have features that make a state a unitary state. So because it is a mixture of both, we call it a quasi-federal state. So federal in normal times, but when there is an emergency, it becomes a unitary state where every power, every decision is taken by the unitary, by the central government at the union. So this is all on federal and unitary system in India. I'll come back with my next lecture, the Union Parliament.